everybody. So I am doing a family video about my family history. And today we have my cousin Alfred. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Dr. Wilmot Alfred Fraser, and I'm a native Charlestonian, and I came back to Charleston in retirement. I retired as a professor of African American Studies. I taught African American Studies at Cheney University in Pennsylvania for about 20 years, from about 1970 to about 1990. And I was a trained Africanist. An Africanist is a person who studies the various aspects of African history and culture. And I've been studying about Africa now since I guess, first course I took in African studies was at Howard University in 1959 with Dr. Rayford Logan, I remember. And it was about the history of colonialism in Africa. Uh, and from that point on, I've been studying about Africa. I did a master's degree in African Studies at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington after I graduated from Howard. So by 1963, I was thoroughly immersed in African lore and African history and African studies. And in 1963, when a lot of terrible things happened in the United States, I took off and went to Africa, went to Europe first, and I did an article, I recall, in the in a magazine in Paris called L'Express magazine. It's like the Time magazine is in the United States. L'Express is like that in Paris. And I talked about my experiences arriving in Paris and how I had begun to encounter various racist aspects of culture in Paris, and how that contradicted what I had heard at the United Nations before I left the United States. I ran into some, as a result of that article published in L'Express, I ran into some African brothers from Senegal and all over Africa. As a matter of fact, they had a small research and publishing company called BERA, Bureau d'études des réalités africaines, BERA, and that was the Office of African Studies. And it was headed by a friend of mine, a guy who became a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, Jean-Pierre Ndiaye, who was from Senegal. And I began to work with them, and we published the first book that I know of that was written by African scholars and an African American of the first history of African Americans. Les Noirs aux États-Unis pour les Africains. The blacks in the United States for African readers.
That's amazing. So
Mhm.
you see, my cousin Alfred, he's taught at um, amazing schools and he just knows so much about African history. So it's amazing just to be here and hear all this wonderful knowledge. So tell us a little bit about the artifact that's above your head.
Well, that piece is from Nigeria, and it's a wood carving, a frieze, a hardwood carving from Nigeria. And a friend of mine, who named Douglas O'Connor, gifted me with that piece many years ago, and I regifted it to my parents for this house in the 1960s. Doug O'Connor and I worked at the African American Institute. Both of us we were both program officers at the African American Institute during the 1960s, and we became great friends. We were living in New York at the time. That's where the headquarters of the African American Institute is. Uh, Doug went out to Africa, and he brought back this piece and gave it to me as a gift. So I've cherished that for many, many years now. And as I said, I regifted it to my parents, and they, um, it's been over this couch for a long time now. Yeah, because
Hmm.
this house was built, I think, in the 1960s, and that's why I gave it to my parents because they just moved into their newly
Mm.
built home. Yeah. Hmm.
Well, that's an excellent
Which has
welcome
since
gift.
become my home.
Yep, and you've been here for quite a
Hmm.
while. So
Hmm.
since you're going to family now, let's dive into some family history. Um, so how are you related to the family? And I have a great aunt, well, a late great aunt, Aunt Ellen, and then I have my great Uncle Al. So how are we all related into this beautiful family?
Well, the family history is a long one in South Carolina. Our family has been here for a very, very long time, probably about 200 years, over 200 years in, um, in South Carolina. And you've been to the Middleton. One of the great joys of my association with family has been the fact that, I got you and your mother, Julie,
Mm-hmm.
it involved with the Middleton family reunion uh, at Middleton Place, which is a part of our family heritage as well. And we, the Middleton aspect, or Middleton side of our family, the Middleton clan, um, it goes back a long way in Charleston and in South Carolina, and we'll see some of that today as I take you around town. We'll go to Five President Place, where during the '70s we put up a plaque in front of the residence of then cousin Mamie Fields, and cousin Mamie wrote a book that kind of chronicles the history of our family called Lemon Swamp and Other Places. She and her granddaughter Karen Fields wrote a book that was very, very well received and told a lot about the history of African American people in Charleston and specifically about our family and how it emerged um, during the period of enslavement and the period following enslavement. Um, that's one of the unique things about that book. It talks about the Reconstruction period and about the period of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Cousin Mamie Fields was a very dynamic woman who was very active in African American affairs here in Charleston, and a teacher, like most of the people in
Yep,
our
most of us.
family.
Yep.
She was a teacher, and she was also an author and historian. So we'll be looking at those at some of those things today as we go around. I think Five President Place will be one of the first stops we make, and you'll be able to see that. Now, the history of the Middletons goes way back, as I said, to at least the 18th, if not the 17th century, the 18th century, and because the Middletons were the white Middletons, the European Middletons, were signers of the Declaration of Independence. And we have a record of family members who were of that, um, part of that, of the, who were enslaved on the Middleton plantation at that time. Um, those stories you can probably turn to Cousin Mamie's book for. And since you are a recipient of a Middleton Fellowship,
Yep.
the first recipient of a Middleton Fellowship, you might be able to dig up, or they might give you some information that we don't have. So we'll look to other sources besides me for the details of the
Hmm.
Middleton family relationship. But the 19 during the 1970s, the early 1970s, we started having family reunions, a lot, Middleton family reunions. And as a result of, Cousin Mamie was the principal organizer around that. And then later on, following Cousin Mamie, then Earl Middleton became the principal organizer. Earl was a member, lived in Orangeburg. He was a realtor and a member of the South Carolina, had been elected to the South Carolina legislature. And Earl became a board member of Middleton Place, the first African American board member of Middleton Place. And every year we'd go out there, uh, not every year, but every periodically, every 5 years, we'd go out there and have a family reunion of sorts, which has devolved into quite an interesting relationship where uh, people of the descendants of Middleton Place, or whatever quote unquote racial background they may be, get together and talk about their common cultural background. And I think it's very very interesting, and indeed a welcome and very pleasant experience as I've and educational experience as I've seen it. It's quite different from when we first went out there, and they had, you know, the they had the stable yards and the African American experience mixed together as one kind of experience at Middleton Place. We objected to that, of course, and Middleton Place has changed considerably as a result of that objection, and seems to be looking for ways to improve upon the improvements that have been made. So let's see how that develops.
Yeah, I will say I started going to the family reunions when I came down here. I think it was either 2018 or 2019.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I would say, them creating the scholarship for the Milton descendants, you know, is really good just to kind of to help us out in the long run, the descendants, because I mean, of course, we didn't benefit from being on the plantation. Um, but yeah, and then going to our family. So, what was it like growing up in Charleston?
Well, the Charleston that I grew up in was considerably different, but there's some things that remain constant. But it was considerably different from the place Charleston has become in recent years. We had a very tight knit African American community, as I recall. There were lots and lots of business activities, African American business activities. The church was an extremely important aspect of everyone's life. So there was this very important religious experience. There were educationally, there were excellent and very good schools. My family, the Middletons and the Frasers. My grandfather was Middleton Fraser, and he was the son of Lucinda Middleton, and that's how I'm tied into the Middleton clan. And your you and your mom are tied into it in that same way, because my grandfather Middleton Fraser was your great uh, grandfather.
Ooh,
You know what I'm saying? He was your great grandfather. And I never knew him. He died when my father was a child, and my grandmother raised four. Let's see, there were at least four of her own children, five actually, and a cousin, her sister's child, who, because her sister had passed away. Our Aunt Elma, I call her Aunt Elma because she was raised with my father and his sisters and brothers. There were Uncle Thad, who was the eldest of my grandmother's children, Aunt Inez, who was your great grandmother,
okay.
and Aunt Vivian,
Mm-hmm.
and then my father. So there were like four of them, and plus Aunt Elma, who was a cousin but raised like a sister. Yeah, so they were. That was a family that my grandmother, Emma Gilliard Fraser, created with Middleton Fraser, and there was a Mary. I should yes, there was a Mary um, Fraser who died. The eldest sister, she was actually the eldest of. She was older than Uncle Thad, but she passed away early, and she was so actually there were five of them, and plus Sonoma.
Oh
Hmm.
wow, so you had a big family.
Yeah, and did it. She was a Wonder Woman. She did all kinds of. She had all kinds of things. She sold insurance. She was an organist. She was a seamstress. She was into everything. You know, grandmother was was really very dynamic woman. I guess she had to be trying to raise that many
Yeah,
kids
raise all those
on
kids.
her own. But I you know I was fortunate to know her. Um Grandma died when I was about 11.
Mm.
I was about 11 years old when she passed away. I still have the New Testament Bible that she gave me for a as a birthday gift at one point. And she was a fantastic woman who raised all those kids, and they became, you know, very successful in their chosen fields, and made great contributions here in Charleston. Um, Uncle Thad was a, a craftsman. He was a he wa- he was a ship's carpenter and a boat builder, and he was a worked at the Navy Yard. He was the first African American lead man at the Navy Yard, and he used to, you know, the nuclear submarines would be serviced at the Charleston Navy Yard, and in order for them to be retrofitted and repaired and maintained, that take them out of the water and put them into a dry dock. And he was the only guy at the Navy Yard, the only craftsman at the Navy Yard who could do that. Everybody would stop
Mm.
work at the Navy Yard to come and see him get those submarines to jump up like fish out of the water into the dry dock. So he knew how to manipulate the floating um, structures of submarines, huge submarines, you know, and make them jump up into dry dock
And
so
that's
they
a
could be
yeah.
repaired. Yeah.
And that just goes to show that our family, like we're entrepreneurs, we're thinkers, educators, there's so many things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now maybe I already said this, but I think there was a school that somebody opened in the family.
Well, early on, you hear the story of Lala, and Lala was a woman who had been Lala was enslaved, but came out of slavery as a teacher, which is a very interesting phenomenon. You know how one could come out of enslavement as a teacher. That story is told in the story of Lala. Is told in Lemon Swamp and other places, and because it maybe recounts that Lala had a school
Mm-hmm.
which she attended as a child. You know, so black women were very instrumental because they were the first working women in American society. We know people who had to actually go to the field every day and work, as well as try to rear children. So the older people in the community tended to take on this function of educating and enculturating the young people, the children who were too young to work. And Lala apparently came out of that teaching tradition, you know, where African Americans used folk tales and like the Brer Rabbit stories that are that emerged in this area in the Low Country to teach young people about the world and about what they would encounter. Um, so that was a very very interesting experience. The fact that someone came out of being enslaved, you know, as a teacher to others. Uh, our family might have been teachers back in Africa, and they, you know, and they just kind of transferred those skills to the environment that they encountered once they had been enslaved. But you know, abilities, skills, talents, human talents are always going to probably rise no matter what type of oppression they face. So we have to be happy, or I should say, we have to be thankful that they were able to express these abilities, uh, even in the face of extreme oppression.
I definitely agree. Extreme
Mhm.
depression, adversity, all of that. So now we're about to go on a little trip around Charleston and see some family homes and just go down memory lane and learn a little bit more. Do you want to tell us some places that we'll visit and
Well,
all?
you want to go to Sullivan's Island, and so we're going to take you to Sullivan's Island so you can say that you've been there and show you a couple of things there, and then we'll come back to the mainland and see Five President Place, which is like the first place that the family seemed to have, that I know of, the family set up a home following enslavement, following the movement off the plantation.
Yeah, so we're gonna go start there first, then come back here and
You know, we would go to Five President Place, then we'll see Avery,
Avery up.
where many of our elders went to school and where I attended school as well. It's now Avery Research Center, part of the College of Charleston. But then back then it was Avery Institute, which trained teachers for literacy, and um, and then Avery High School, which I attended when I was coming up until it closed. It was closed in 1954. Then I went to Burke High School. Mhm.
Yeah, so you've been so I
So
think mm-hmm.
we'll see all those places. We'll see those places, and we'll see Wilmot J. Fraser School, a school that was named for my father. That that's was just done not long ago. It reopened as Early College High School at Wilmot J. Fraser campus because Wilmot J. Fraser School originally was an elementary school named for my father, but they the elementary school was closed, and as a result of the closing, after the closing, it was reopened and renovated and reopened the, because of the insistence of the community uh, as Early College High School at Wilmot J. Fraser campus. Because many people on the east side of Charleston remember my father as their first principal. He was principal at least three schools on the east side of Charleston, which was the major African American neighborhood in Charleston. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad they've kept his name alive and
Mhm.
paying homage to his heritage and what he's done for the community. And then lastly, before we go, so mom, was there a church that your dad opened in Charleston?
No, the church took place in Miami, Florida.
Mimi? Okay. Well, that'll be another video for another time. Alrighty. Well, we're gonna head on over to Sullivan's Island.
That